My boyfriend's brother told us to break up because his insecure new girlfriend claimed I made her uncomfortable. But the truth was, he found out my boyfriend secretly bought me an engagement ring and was furious I was getting the commitment he never gave his own partner. It seems like ages ago, but my partner Nate and I began our relationship when we were just 17. We are both 21 now, and honestly, our connection has always felt incredibly steady and quite natural. It is not just him, though. His family has become like a second home to me over these past 4 years. I genuinely cannot imagine significant holidays, Easter brunch, Thanksgiving dinners overflowing with food, or cozy Christmas mornings, without being right there with them. Nate's mother, Susan, is wonderful. We connected almost immediately. We share a passion for questionable reality television and complex baking projects that sometimes end in a mess, but always in laughter. Nate often good-naturedly complains that she probably calls me more than she calls him, and honestly, he might be correct. We just get along that well. His father, Robert, is like the paternal figure I always wished I had more of during my upbringing. He is a calm, kind presence, always ready with guidance or simply a listening ear. He has mentioned to me more than once, especially after a glass or two of wine at family gatherings, that he views me less as Nate's girlfriend and more as another daughter. Hearing that always fills my heart. We have these small routines, like dissecting the weekend's football games or gently inquiring about my academic progress. Nate has an older brother, Mark, who is 24. He is perfectly pleasant, and we get along fine, but he has always been much more quiet and reserved than the rest of the family. He keeps to himself more, content to step back while Nate, his parents, and I are chatting away. So, while I like him, I do not know him nearly as well as I know Susan, Robert, and Nate. It was actually a bit of a surprise to everyone when Mark recently started seeing someone. As far as I knew, this was the first serious relationship he had been in since we all met back in high school. Naturally, everyone was curious and hopeful for him. This past weekend was particularly special. It was Susan and Robert's wedding anniversary. They always liked to commemorate it with a pleasant family dinner, and I was, of course, invited as usual. This year felt a little different, though, because they had also asked Mark to bring his new girlfriend, Jessica, so everyone could finally meet her. She is our age, 21, and I was genuinely looking forward to it. I thought maybe Mark had found someone wonderful, and perhaps I would even make a new friend. I went over to Nate's parents' house early on Saturday afternoon. Susan and I had ambitious plans to prepare a challenging coq au vin recipe for the anniversary dinner, something we had been discussing trying for weeks. The afternoon was lovely and relaxed. Just me, Nate, Susan, and Robert. We chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, listened to music, and simply enjoyed the comfortable familiarity. Nate helped his dad with some minor repair tasks in the garage, and Susan and I chatted while the chicken simmered. It felt like any other delightful weekend gathering. Mark and Jessica arrived later in the evening, just as we were putting the finishing touches on the meal preparation. The change in atmosphere was almost immediate. Jessica walked in, and right away, she seemed determined to make a significant impression, though perhaps not the kind she intended. She surveyed the room, focused on Nate and Robert, who were conversing near the fireplace, and walked straight up to them. She stated rather loudly that she had not realized all the men in the family were so attractive. Then she gave both Nate and Robert these embraces that seemed to linger just a bit too long, pressing herself against them in a way that felt overly familiar for a first meeting. Nate visibly stiffened, and Robert had a slightly awkward, polite smile fixed on his face. After detaching herself from the men, she finally turned towards Susan, who was standing near me by the kitchen island. Jessica completely ignored me, did not even glance my way, and gushed to Susan about how lovely she was. Then, with a playful wink that did not feel playful at all, she added a remark about Susan needing to be careful because her husband was now on Jessica's radar. It was meant as a joke, I suppose, but it landed poorly. The moment Jessica turned away to look around the living room again, Susan leaned towards me, her eyes wide, and whispered that she had a really bad feeling about this one. My own stomach felt uneasy. The mood was just off. Susan and I tried to stay occupied in the kitchen, plating appetizers and getting things organized, but our kitchen has an open layout looking directly into the living room, so we could not help but see what was happening. Jessica seemed determined to be the center of attention. At one point, wanting to show Robert something on her phone, she did not just lean over, she perched right on his lap on the armchair. He looked distinctly uncomfortable, trying to subtly lean away. A few minutes later, she did the same thing with Nate on the sofa while asking him about his college major. He practically sprang up, making an excuse about needing to check on the drinks. Both men looked increasingly awkward, clearly not enjoying the overly flirtatious physical contact. It was not long before Nate retreated to the kitchen, joining Susan and me. He leaned against the counter, sighing, and muttered under his breath that he really did not like her. Trying to perhaps smooth things over or just include her normally, I decided to invite Jessica over to taste the pasta sauce we were preparing for a side dish. We all generally enjoy spicy food in Nate's family, but I was not sure about her tolerance. I offered her a spoonful. She took a bite, paused, and then said it was good. Then she added, looking me up and down almost appraisingly, that she could see why they kept bringing me around. It was phrased like a compliment, but the tone felt backhanded, almost as if my only worth was my cooking. It just reinforced the strange feeling I had about her. Susan caught my eye again and gave a slight shake of her head. Soon enough, it was time for dinner. We moved to the dining room, the table set beautifully with the fine china for the anniversary. Nate's family has a custom of saying grace before special meals. Usually, Robert or Susan leads, but tonight, wanting to be welcoming, Susan invited Jessica to do the honors as their guest. Jessica accepted eagerly. She bowed her head and launched into a lengthy thank you to God, mentioning the delicious food, the lovely home, and thanking him for Susan, Robert, Mark, and Nate by name. She pointedly, unmistakably left me out. It was not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, I suppose. I was not deeply religious myself, but it felt deliberate, an exclusion meant to be noticed. I did not react outwardly, just kept my head bowed, but I could feel Nate shift beside me. And when I looked up, both he and Susan shot me identical, "Did you just hear that?" glances across the table. Dinner itself became a peculiar display. Robert, in his usual manner with new acquaintances, started asking Jessica questions, trying to get to know her, about her family, her studies, her job, her interests. It was the same gentle, welcoming inquiry he had given me years ago. From her responses, she sounded like she came from a perfectly ordinary background, perhaps a bit restless in her current retail position, but otherwise unremarkable. She seemed pleasant enough on the surface when directly answering his questions. After a while, Robert seemed satisfied and turned his attention to me, asking about the volunteer project I had recently started at the local animal shelter and my preliminary research into graduate school programs. I was excited to share some updates, especially about a particular dog I had been working with. But before I could get more than a sentence out, Jessica interjected. She interrupted me mid-thought, launching into a long complaint about how much she disliked her job, how unjust her boss was, and how she deserved something better. Robert listened politely for a moment, but his responses became noticeably more terse, just short nods and an ah. It was clear his interest had waned. He then deliberately turned back to me, pointedly ignoring Jessica's ongoing monologue, and asked specifically about how my parents were doing and if my sister had enjoyed her recent trip. This pattern repeated itself throughout the entire meal. Every time someone, Susan, Robert, or even Nate, directed a question or comment my way, acknowledging my presence or asking for my opinion, Jessica would somehow redirect the conversation back to herself. If I mentioned a class I was enjoying, she would talk about a class she found dull. If Susan complimented the earrings I was wearing, Jessica would immediately talk about jewelry she wished to purchase. It was relentless and draining. Nate started looking increasingly annoyed, clenching his jaw, while Susan just seemed weary. Robert maintained his politeness, but his focus kept drifting. Towards the end of the meal, as coffee was being served, Jessica decided to make another one of her remarks. She looked at Mark, then playfully nudged Nate, who was sitting next to her, and said something along the lines of Mark needing to be careful because she might just decide to leave him for Nate. It was awkward and inappropriate, especially given her earlier conduct. By this point, I was mostly just tired of her antics and did not feel jealous, just vaguely irritated. Wanting to defuse the situation with humor rather than confrontation, I played along lightly. I smiled and said something like, "Yes, Nate, just make sure you remember to invite me to the wedding when it happens." I meant it sarcastically, a way to alleviate the strangeness. Apparently, that was the wrong thing to say. It was like a switch flipped. Jessica's playful demeanor vanished, and her eyes filled with tears. She suddenly started crying, accusing me of trying to embarrass her all night long. She claimed I was deliberately making her look bad in front of Nate's family, that I was acting like I owned the place and monopolizing everyone's attention. It escalated quickly into a rambling, tearful tirade about how threatened she felt by my bond with the family and how I was making it impossible for her to fit in. The rest of us just sat there, stunned into silence. Mark looked mortified, trying to quiet her down. The atmosphere was completely ruined. Almost immediately after her outburst, Jessica stood up, grabbed a visibly distressed Mark by the arm, and practically pulled him out of the dining room and towards the front door. They had originally planned to stay the night, as Susan and Robert had invited them to make a weekend of it, but they were out of the house within minutes, leaving a trail of bewildered silence behind them. Once the door closed, there was a collective sigh of relief around the table. Susan immediately reached across and squeezed my hand, apologizing profusely for Jessica's behavior. Robert echoed her sentiments, saying he was sorry I had to endure that during their anniversary dinner. Nate wrapped an arm around me, looking furious on my behalf. We all agreed Jessica's behavior was completely out of line. We tried to salvage the rest of the evening, having some coffee and later some wine, talking about anything but Jessica and Mark for a while, but the celebratory mood had definitely diminished. We ended up watching a movie, trying to relax, but the tension lingered. The next morning felt heavy. We were having a late, quiet breakfast when Susan's phone rang. It was Mark. She answered, and his voice was immediately audible, tight with anger. Sensing this was important, Susan put the phone on speaker so we could all hear. Mark sounded incredibly upset. He launched straight into how distressed Jessica was, blaming both me and his family for the disastrous evening. He said Jessica was devastated, feeling attacked and unwelcome, and was now having serious doubts about their relationship and about him. According to Mark, Jessica felt that as long as I was so deeply integrated into the family, she could not envision a future for them together. Then came the truly unbelievable part. Mark, sounding completely serious, stated that the only way to resolve this, the only way for Jessica to feel secure and stop crying, was if Nate and I ended our relationship. He actually asked Nate, right there on speakerphone, to terminate our 4-year relationship to appease his girlfriend of a few months. Nate immediately rejected that, telling Mark absolutely not, that it was an absurd demand. Susan and Robert interjected, telling Mark his request was unfair and unacceptable. Mark's response was chilling. He told them, his voice cold, that it was either me out of the family picture or he was. He stated he did not want to lose Jessica over someone who was not even real family, someone not related by blood. Then he hung up. We were all just stunned. Susan looked like she was about to cry. Robert was pale and quiet. Nate was furious and hurt. Since that phone call, Mark has not answered any calls or texts from his parents or Nate. The silence is deafening and incredibly stressful for everyone. Susan is worried sick about him. Robert feels caught in the middle, and Nate is oscillating between anger at his brother and guilt that this somehow involves me. I feel this terrible mix of guilt, confusion, and hurt. I know rationally I did not do anything wrong, but I hate being the catalyst for such a massive family division. I love Nate, and I adore his parents. They feel like my own. The thought of being the reason this family breaks apart is unbearable. But the idea of breaking up with Nate to satisfy the demands of his brother and his incredibly insecure girlfriend is unthinkable. I am just completely lost, unsure how to navigate this predicament or even how to process the sheer absurdity of it all. Update. First off, thank you to everyone who shared their thoughts. Reading the responses really helped me feel less like I was losing my mind or being selfish for wanting to stay in my relationship and remain close to Nate's family. It strengthened my resolve not to let Mark or Jessica dictate our lives or manipulate the situation. Nate and I are sticking together, and his parents are fully supportive of us. There has been a bit of a development that sheds some more light on perhaps why Mark reacted so extremely, although it does not excuse his or Jessica's behavior. This morning, after another day of stressful silence, Susan finally managed to get Mark on the phone. He agreed to come over and talk, thankfully without Jessica this time. Nate and I went over too, preparing ourselves for another difficult conversation. Mark seemed calmer initially when he arrived. He actually began by apologizing for the way things unfolded at the anniversary dinner and for his outburst on the phone. It felt like a step in the right direction. However, that feeling did not last long. While he apologized for his delivery, he made it clear he was still completely supporting Jessica. He reiterated his belief that my presence in the family dynamic was the core problem for his relationship. He again suggested that the best thing for his relationship would be for Nate and me to separate. This, understandably, provoked Nate. There was a lot of heated back and forth between the brothers. Nate was trying to make Mark see how irrational and unfair he was being, how Jessica's insecurities should not destroy long-standing family connections. Mark kept insisting that Jessica felt threatened and that Nate and his parents were not understanding her perspective or prioritizing Mark's happiness. He accused Nate of always having things easy, of having the perfect relationship in the family's favor while he struggled. I mostly stayed quiet during this exchange. It felt like something they needed to resolve, however painfully. Susan and Robert tried to mediate, but both brothers were too entrenched in their positions. Eventually, Mark got angry all over again, his voice rising. He stood up abruptly, ready to leave. As he was heading towards the door, he turned back, looked directly at Nate, and spat out something truly venomous. He told Nate he could shove that ring he bought up his rear end, and that Nate should not even think about inviting him to the wedding. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The room felt thick with tension and confusion after he left. A ring? A wedding? Nate looked incredibly uncomfortable and pained. After a few moments of heavy silence, Nate took a deep breath and decided to explain. He turned to me, his expression a mixture of regret and nervousness, and told me something he had been keeping secret. Apparently, he had purchased an engagement ring for me several months ago. His plan was not to propose immediately, but sometime in the near future when the moment felt right. He had excitedly shared this news with his parents and, crucially, with Mark a while back. Nate said that almost immediately after he told Mark about the ring and his intention to propose, the dynamic between them shifted. Mark became more distant, subtly more critical, and there was an undercurrent of tension that Nate had not fully understood until now. Hearing Mark's parting shot about the ring and the wedding made it click for Nate and for me. So, while Jessica's behavior was undeniably awful and likely fueled by her own insecurities, it seems like a significant part of Mark's intense reaction and his willingness to back her unreasonable demands stems from his own feelings about Nate planning to marry me. Maybe it is jealousy, maybe it is feeling left behind, maybe it is resentment that his younger brother is reaching major life milestones first. I am still bewildered by Jessica's actions, the flirting, the interruptions, the sudden meltdown. But understanding this underlying resentment from Mark makes his ultimatum, while still unacceptable, slightly less baffling. It was not just about Jessica's feelings. It was intertwined with his own issues regarding Nate and me becoming serious. Learning about the proposal plan was definitely a shock. Part of me felt a surge of happiness knowing Nate wants to marry me. But another part felt strange realizing this huge family drama was partly revolving around a ring I did not even know existed. It is a weird mix of emotions. Someone asked about Mark's dating history, and Susan confirmed later that this relationship with Jessica is genuinely the first serious one he has had since a brief high school fling when he was about 16. He is 24 now, so maybe seeing Nate so settled and planning a future triggered something in him, making him cling fiercely to his own new relationship, however flawed it might be. Anyway, that is the latest. Nate felt bad that the surprise was partially spoiled, but we talked it through properly later. He reassured me he still plans to propose officially with a ring when he originally intended to. We are solid, and I am definitely staying with him. I am also going to continue being part of Susan and Robert's lives, just as before. However, I think it is wise for Nate and me to keep our distance from Mark and, by extension, Jessica for the foreseeable future. Things are far too raw right now, and honestly, I do not trust that further interactions would lead to more drama. Hopefully, Mark will eventually come around, but until then, protecting our peace and our relationship has to be the priority. Now, let us move to the next story. Story 2. My parents wanted to give my share of inheritance to their favorite daughter, but little did they know that my grandparents had other plans. I, a 28-year-old male, come from a family with a long and complicated history of favoritism. My parents, especially my father, have always favored my younger sister, Amy, 25-year-old female, over me. This favoritism began when we were children and only intensified as we grew up. From my earliest memories, Amy was always the cherished child. When I was 5 and she was 2, our parents threw her an extravagant birthday celebration with a bouncy castle, petting zoo, and professional face painters. For my birthday that same year, I received a small family dinner and a store-bought cake. This established the pattern for years to come. As we aged, the discrepancies became more apparent. Amy always received the newest toys, the finest clothes, and the most attention. I recall when I was 10, I saved up my allowance for months to buy a new bicycle. When Amy saw it, she threw a tantrum because she wanted one too. Instead of teaching her about saving or waiting, my parents immediately went out and bought her an even superior bicycle than mine. School was another area where the favoritism was evident. My parents attended all of Amy's school events, but often missed mine. In 4th grade, I had the main role in the school play. I was so excited and practiced for weeks. On the night of the performance, my parents arrived an hour late, missing my big scene. They said Amy had a stomach ache, and they were comforting her. I later discovered she was fine. They had just lost track of time while playing with her. When it came to academics, nothing I achieved ever seemed sufficient. In middle school, I consistently earned straight A's, joined the math club, and even won a regional science fair. My parents barely acknowledged these accomplishments. But when Amy received a B+ on a single test in her weakest subject, they threw her a celebratory dinner and bought her a new phone as motivation to continue improving. High school was particularly challenging. I dedicated myself to every activity I could, hoping to earn their approval. I was captain of the debate team, editor of the school newspaper, and maintained a 4.0 grade point average. Meanwhile, Amy casually went through school, barely maintaining a C average, and spending most of her time socializing with friends. During my junior year, I was selected as one of 2 students from our school to attend a prestigious summer program at Harvard. It was a huge honor, and I was thrilled. When I shared the news at dinner, my father grunted and changed the subject to Amy's upcoming dance recital. My mother at least said, "That is nice," but quickly moved on. On the night of Amy's recital, which fell on the same day I was leaving for Harvard, my parents could not drive me to the airport because they did not want to miss Amy's performance. I had to ask a friend's parents for a ride. The college application process was another painful experience. I spent months perfecting my essays, participating in extracurriculars, and studying for the SATs. I was accepted into several top-tier universities and received a substantial scholarship to my dream school. When I announced this at dinner, my parents' response was lukewarm at best. My father said, "That is good, but do not let it go to your head. College is not everything." My mother added, "Just do not forget about us when you are off becoming a big shot." In contrast, when Amy barely graduated high school and decided not to attend college, my parents were completely supportive. They praised her for knowing herself and not conforming to societal pressures. They even bought her a car as a graduation present, something they never did for me. This constant favoritism took a heavy toll on me emotionally. I struggled with depression and anxiety throughout my teens and early 20s. I started seeing a therapist in college, which helped me understand that my parents' behavior was not my fault. It took years of effort to build my self-esteem and learn to validate myself instead of seeking approval from my parents. Despite the lack of support from my immediate family, I managed to build a good life for myself. I graduated college with honors, secured a good job in finance, and even purchased my own house by 27. I am proud of what I have achieved, even if my parents are not. Now, here is where the current drama begins. My grandfather on my father's side passed away recently. He was a successful businessman who built a fortune from scratch, and he left behind a significant estate. In his will, he divided his assets equally among his children, my father and his siblings, and grandchildren, me, Amy, and our cousins. My share of the inheritance was substantial, about $500,000. It would have allowed me to pay off my student loans, invest in my future, and perhaps even start my own business someday. I was grateful for this unexpected windfall and the opportunities it could provide. However, when the will was read, my parents were visibly upset. They pulled me aside afterward and told me they thought it was unfair that I received an equal share. They said Amy needed the money more because she was struggling. She works part-time at a coffee shop and lives in our parents' basement. I was shocked but tried to stay calm. I explained that this was Grandpa's decision, and it was not up to them to alter it. They insisted that I should do the right thing and give my share to Amy. When I refused, they became angry and started guilt-tripping me, saying I was selfish and ungrateful. My father brought up every instance he could think of where they had supported me. He mentioned paying for my braces, which were medically necessary, buying me school supplies, the bare minimum, and letting me live at home during college, even though I worked part-time to contribute to expenses. He conveniently forgot about the car they bought Amy, the countless shopping sprees, and the fact that they are still supporting her at 25. The situation escalated quickly. My father, as the executor of the will, decided to take matters into his own hands. He announced that he was going to reinterpret Grandpa's wishes and give my entire share to Amy on top of her own inheritance. He claimed, "This is what Grandpa would have wanted if he had known our individual circumstances." I was devastated. Not only was this clearly illegal, but it was also a painful reminder of how little my parents valued me. I tried to reason with them, pointing out that Grandpa had always treated all his grandchildren equally, and that he was well aware of our situations. My mother then accused me of speaking ill of the deceased by suggesting Grandpa would have wanted anything different from what my father was proposing. I brought up specific memories of Grandpa encouraging my academic and career pursuits, but my parents dismissed these as misunderstandings. They claimed Grandpa had privately expressed concern about Amy's future and had wanted to ensure she was taken care of. When I asked why he had not just written the will that way then, they did not have an answer. Amy, for her part, seemed uncomfortable with the situation but did not speak up against our parents. When I tried to talk to her privately, she just shrugged and said, "Mom and Dad know best." It was clear she was not going to be any help. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I reached out to my paternal grandmother, Grandpa's widow, for advice. She was furious when she heard what was happening. She told me that this was absolutely not what Grandpa had intended and that my parents had no right to change the will. Grandma shared some information that shed new light on the situation. Apparently, my parents had approached Grandpa a few years ago, asking him to leave everything to Amy in his will. Grandpa had firmly refused, stating that he believed in treating all his grandchildren equally. He had even added a clause to his will stating that anyone who contested the equal distribution would forfeit their share. Armed with this information, I confronted my parents. They were shocked that Grandma had told me about their previous attempt to influence the will. My father tried to justify it by saying they were just looking out for Amy's future, but I could see the guilt on their faces. Grandma took action immediately. She contacted her lawyer and the other executors of the will. She also reached out to my father's siblings, who were equally outraged by what my father was trying to do. Together, they put a stop to my father's plan and ensured that the will would be executed as written. My parents were forced to back down, but they are furious with me. They accused me of turning the family against them and said I should have handled this in-house instead of involving others. My mother cried about how I had betrayed them and broken the family apart. My father threatened to cut me out of their will entirely, to which I responded that I had never expected anything from them anyway. They are now threatening to cut me off completely if I accept their money, as they see it. My father even went so far as to say that if I take the inheritance, I am no longer welcome in their home. My mother, in a particularly low blow, said that my acceptance of the money shows that I never really loved them and was just waiting to cash in on their deaths. The extended family is divided on the issue. Some of my cousins are supportive, recognizing the long-standing favoritism and praising me for standing up for myself. Others think I should have just given in to keep the peace, saying that family harmony is more important than money. My father's siblings are firmly on my side, but this has caused tension between them and my parents. Amy is caught in the middle of all this. She told me privately that she did not ask for this and feels guilty, but she is not willing to stand up to our parents. I do not blame her entirely. She has been conditioned her whole life to rely on them and seek their approval. Still, a part of me wishes she would support me just this once. This situation has brought up a lot of old pain and resentment. I find myself thinking back to all the times I was overlooked or dismissed in favor of Amy, the birthday parties I did not have, the school events my parents missed, the achievements that went unrecognized. It is like a lifetime of unfairness is coming to a head in this one event. I am standing my ground and plan to accept my inheritance as Grandpa intended. But the whole situation has created a huge rift in the family. My parents are barely speaking to me, and family gatherings have become tense and uncomfortable. Last week, I skipped our monthly family dinner for the first time ever because I could not face the cold shoulders and accusatory glares. Despite the drama, a small part of me feels empowered. For the first time in my life, I am standing up to my parents' unfair treatment. I am asserting my worth and refusing to be sidelined. It is terrifying and liberating at the same time. I believe I am in the right here, but the family drama is taking a toll on me. I have started having anxiety attacks again, something I have not experienced since college. I am considering going back to therapy to help deal with all this stress. Am I the problem for accepting my inheritance and not giving in to my parents' demands? Should I have just given Amy the money to keep the peace? I am tired of being the family scapegoat, but I am also scared of losing my family entirely. Any advice or perspective would be appreciated. Update. It has been about 6 months since my original post, and a lot has transpired. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It truly helped me stay strong during a difficult period. First, let me address the legal aspect of things. As many of you suggested, I did consult with a lawyer of my own. He confirmed that what my father tried to do was indeed illegal and that I had every right to my inheritance. He helped me document everything and prepared to take legal action if necessary. Thankfully, it did not come to that. My grandmother and her lawyer, along with my father's siblings, managed to resolve matters without going to court. The will was executed as written, and I received my full inheritance. My father was removed as an executor due to his attempt to manipulate the will. This process took several weeks and was incredibly stressful. There were tense meetings, heated phone calls, and even a few threats of lawsuits from my parents. But in the end, the law was clear, and they had to back down. The family fallout, however, has been significant and is still ongoing. My parents initially doubled down on their position. They accused me of being greedy and uncaring towards my sister. They even tried to rally other family members against me, spreading rumors that I had somehow tricked or manipulated Grandpa into leaving me money. Fortunately, most of the family saw through their manipulation. There was one particularly unpleasant incident at a family gathering about a month after the will was settled. My parents showed up uninvited. My aunt was hosting and had not asked them to come, and caused a scene. My father started yelling about how I had stolen from Amy and corrupted Grandma against them. My mother dramatically threw an old photo album at my feet, saying I had destroyed all these happy memories. It was embarrassing and painful, and it took several relatives to calm the situation and ask my parents to leave. My grandmother, bless her heart, became my strongest advocate through all of this. She shared stories about how my grandfather had always been proud of my accomplishments and how he specifically wanted to ensure all his grandchildren had equal opportunities. She even revealed that Grandpa had kept a scrapbook of my achievements, newspaper clippings of academic awards, copies of my college acceptance letters, and even the program from that school play my parents had been late to. This revelation was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Grandma also took it upon herself to set the record straight with the extended family. She called a family meeting, excluding my parents, where she laid out the whole history of my parents' favoritism, including incidents I had long forgotten or never even knew about. It was vindicating to have someone finally acknowledge the unfairness I had experienced for years. But it also opened old wounds. As for my sister Amy, she finally found her voice in all this. After some soul-searching and several long conversations with our grandmother, she approached me privately and apologized for not standing up for me earlier. She admitted that she knew our parents' favoritism was wrong, but had been too afraid to challenge it. We had a long, emotional talk about our childhood and how it affected both of us. Amy confessed that being the favored child was not as great as it seemed. She felt immense pressure to live up to our parents' expectations and never learned how to stand on her own 2 feet. She shared stories of times she wanted to achieve things on her own, but our parents would swoop in and do everything for her, robbing her of the chance to grow and learn from her mistakes. This conversation was a turning point for our relationship. We started to rebuild the sibling bond that had been damaged by our parents' favoritism. We have been meeting regularly for coffee, just the 2 of us, to talk and support each other through this family upheaval. Amy surprised everyone by announcing that she was going to use her inheritance to attend college. She said watching me stand up for myself inspired her to take control of her own life. She enrolled in a local community college to start with plans to transfer to a 4-year university once she figures out what she wants to study. Our parents were shocked. I think they realized their babying had not done Amy any favors. My parents' reaction to all this has been mixed and evolving. At first, they were furious with both of us. They accused me of turning Amy against them and tried to guilt her into giving up college to support the family. When that did not work, they switched tactics. My mother, after several long conversations with my grandmother and witnessing the positive changes in Amy, started to see how their behavior had been harmful. She has taken some tentative steps towards reconciliation, even going so far as to start therapy to work on her issues. She reached out to me to apologize, admitting that she had been unfair and asking for a chance to make things right. It is a slow process, and I am cautiously optimistic, but I am also maintaining firm boundaries. My father, unfortunately, has been less willing to admit any wrongdoing. He is still angry and feels like he is the victim in all this. He is barely speaking to me and has been cold towards Amy since she decided to go to college. He has made a few attempts to manipulate us, promising to forgive us if we just admit we were wrong or threatening to sell our childhood home if we do not come to our senses. We are both standing firm, but it is painful to watch him push away both his children like this. The extended family dynamics have shifted significantly. I have become closer to my grandmother and my father's siblings, who have been wonderfully supportive. My aunts and uncles have shared their own stories of dealing with my father's difficult behavior over the years, which has helped me feel less alone in this struggle. I have also formed deeper connections with some of my cousins who stood by me. We have started a monthly cousin dinner where we can all catch up without the pressure of the older generation's drama. As for me, I have been using my inheritance wisely. I paid off my student loans, which has given me an incredible sense of financial freedom. I have set up a diverse investment portfolio with the help of a financial advisor. I have also set aside some money to potentially start my own business in the future. I am exploring the idea of opening a community center that offers affordable mental health services and financial literacy classes. But the most meaningful use of the money for me has been funding therapy for myself and offering to do the same for Amy. We are both working on healing from our childhood experiences and learning to set healthy boundaries with our parents. It is a long process, but I already feel like I am making progress in understanding and overcoming the effects of the long-term favoritism and emotional neglect. This whole ordeal has led to some unexpected positive changes in my life. I have learned a lot about setting boundaries and standing up for myself. It has not been easy, and there are still tough days, but I know I did the right thing. I am proud of myself for not giving into the pressure and guilt. One of the most surprising outcomes has been a shift in my career goals. Dealing with all this family drama and going through therapy has made me realize how passionate I am about helping others who have experienced similar family dynamics. I am now considering going back to school to become a family therapist specializing in adult children of emotionally immature parents. I have also started volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring kids from difficult family backgrounds. It is incredibly rewarding to be able to provide the kind of support and encouragement I wish I had had as a child. I am even thinking about using some of my inheritance to set up a scholarship fund for kids from similar situations. My relationship with Amy has continued to improve. We have started a tradition of having a siblings day once a month where we do something fun together, just the two of us. Last month, we went hiking and had a picnic, and it was the most relaxed and connected we have felt since we were little kids. We are slowly rebuilding our relationship on our own terms, without our parents' influence. As for my parents, things are still complicated. My mother has been making efforts to repair our relationship. She has been attending therapy regularly, and has even started to acknowledge some of the harm her favoritism caused. We have had a few one-on-one lunches where we have had some honest, albeit difficult, conversations about our past and how we can move forward. It is not perfect, but it is progress. My father, however, remains resistant to change. He still maintains that he did nothing wrong and that Amy and I are being ungrateful. He has missed several family events because he refuses to be in the same room as me. It hurts, but I am learning to accept that I cannot control his reactions or force him to see things differently. Grandma has become a rock for both Amy and me. She has been sharing more stories about our grandfather and how proud he would be of us for standing up for ourselves. She has also been a great mediator in family conflicts, always advocating for fairness and understanding. The whole experience has taught me a lot about the true meaning of family. I have realized that sometimes the family you choose can be more supportive than the one you are born into. I have formed closer bonds with my aunts, uncles, and cousins who stood by me, and I have even developed a close-knit group of friends who have been incredibly supportive throughout this ordeal. I have also learned the importance of self-care and setting boundaries. I no longer feel guilty for prioritizing my own well-being, and I am getting better at saying no to situations that are harmful to my mental health. I have even started exploring new hobbies and interests that I had always put off because I was so focused on trying to win my parents' approval. To those who are in similar situations, I want to say, do not let anyone make you feel guilty for receiving what is rightfully yours. It is okay to stand up for yourself, even if it causes conflict. Family dynamics can be complicated, but you deserve to be treated with respect and fairness. Remember, it is never too late to start healing and building the life you deserve. Seek therapy if you need it. Surround yourself with supportive people, and do not be afraid to set boundaries. Your worth is not determined by how your family treats you, but by who you are as a person. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice and support. It meant more than you know during a really difficult time. While the journey has not been easy, I am looking forward to the future with a sense of optimism and self-assurance I have not felt in years. I am excited to see where this new chapter of my life will lead.